Okay, I've inverted the circuit here, which means basically that I've connected the two positive sides together in common. So now it's common on the positive, and I've moved the two negatives over to the spark gap right there between that swirl and the connector in there. And then there are pith balls just to the sides. You can see kind of the distance there, so about an inch, inch and a half. Spark gap is maybe an eighth of an inch. Let's see. Get a decent, this is as far as I can zoom, but it's about an eighth of an inch, and it starts wiggling, oscillating. I was going to say wascillating. It starts moving around once the power is applied. And I've disconnected it now so that the 80 kilovolt meter is not connected between the negative side. It's connected to this right side. Still connected here, right? And it would normally have to be connected back to the positive to get a reading, but it's disconnected and floating. So right now there's no way to create a disparity between the two negative electrodes. That disparity will develop over time as I turn it on, and one side will build charge enough that it starts to break over. So let's see, go ahead and turn this on. Get it up to about 90. Let's see. Amps, right, input volts, 90, so that would be about 45 VAC on the 120 volt input. Not any breakdown yet. Bring it up, go ahead and bring that up too. Now start getting some breakdown. See that oscillation develops there. Curious. What's more curious is that as I turn it up to about 165 VAC mark, it will go into a resonance state, which will cause the pith balls to be repelled. So I'm going to go ahead and crank that up. I'll show you on this side, and then I'll show you the reading. Hitting it right now. The input drop, an amp at about 90 volts. What's curious here, right, is I can then decrease back to about there. It dropped half an amp, right, from an amp down to a half amp, and the voltage is dropped. But we still have the same resonant effect developed over here. It hasn't fallen out of whatever state it's in. There, it fell back out. So if I kill that all the way, it's fallen out of its resonance state. So it's kind of interesting. It's similar to the Bedini effect with the SG, where you have to give it enough current to spin up fast enough, to develop a fast enough oscillation, right? Because that's what the RPM is actually. It's the frequency of impulse. As that goes up, you have to give it more and more current to breach a certain point. Once you breach that point, you can then turn the input back down some percentage, so that you're not constantly drawing that total percentage of the input power. So on this setup, it was about 90 volts at an amp, so about 90 watts, to get into that resonance state. And then I tweaked it back down to about half of that input. And because it's a variac, the voltage drops as well. So it went down to about half an amp draw. But the input volts also went down to about 60 volts AC, from about, what's 165 divided in half? 70, 80, 83 volts, 82.5 volts, thereabouts. So it was at 82.5 volts down to about 60 volts. So 82 volts, we called it 90 volts earlier, right? 90 volts at an amp, 90 watts, and then about half of that. So it's a pretty interesting function. It means that there's something there. Assuming there's an actual collection setup once it reaches that resonance state, that ability to turn it down a little bit probably won't exist, because we're going to be collecting, or it won't be as much or as drastic a change, because it's going to have to be held above a particular straight for the collection, which is then sucking out of that field to be able to continue collecting at. But that would be an open field, because it's an air gap. It's ionizing the local gases in that area, which aren't isolated from the circuit. Right? It's not inside a vessel that's containing a particular volume of gas, and only that gas is what's being allowed to be messed with. This is actually open air, so I don't know. Next thing to do is to put, I guess, another coil in there. Yeah, I'm kind of stalled out here. I'm not sure where to go next. There's a few different ways to work through, and it's just working through the different configurations to try and see which one produces the greatest return. And maybe that's the next thing to do. It's just work, and I'm getting kind of tired of doing work after 15 years on this stuff. Anyway, cheers. This is the negative sides, negative relative potential.